The brass bell sang its cheerful tune as Kang Minho pushed through the door of Sweet Dreams Bakery, and for a moment, he felt completely out of place. His charcoal suit, tailored to perfection in Seoul, seemed absurdly formal against the backdrop of powder blue walls decorated with photographs of whimsical desserts. The air was thick with the perfume of brown sugar and fresh bread, a warmth that wrapped around him like an old memory he'd been trying to forget. He was here on business, nothing more. An engagement cake for a marriage that felt more like a corporate merger than a union of hearts. His sharp gaze swept across the intimate space, taking in the glass cases filled with delicate confections and the soft melody of jazz drifting from hidden speakers. This place felt like stepping through a portal into someone else's life, far removed from the concrete and steel of his usual territory. As the leader of the Heartwarming syndicate, Minho commanded authority through presence and calculated intimidation. But here, surrounded by sugar-kissed surfaces and the gentle pulse of contentment, he felt strangely out of his element. Someone called from behind the counter, a voice like warm caramel sliding over velvet, and Minho's entire world stopped spinning. That voice. God, that voice. He'd spent 6 years trying to scrub it from his memory, and yet here it was, as familiar as his own heartbeat. His pulse hammered against his throat as a figure stepped out from the kitchen, hands dusted white with flour, a radiant smile illuminating features that had lived in his dreams since the day he'd walked away. Kenya Morrison froze mid-stride, a small child balanced on her hip, his tiny fingers sticky with pink icing. The boy looked up at Minho with wide, curious brown eyes, completely unaware that the universe had just tilted on its axis. Minho, Kenya breathed, and the single word carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions. Time suspended itself in the sweetness of Sweet Dreams Bakery. Minho stood rooted to the spot, his carefully constructed world trembling as he stared at the woman who had once been his entire universe. Kenya looked exactly as he remembered, her rich dark skin seeming to glow from some inner light, her natural hair styled in graceful twists that framed her face, and those expressive brown eyes that had always seen past every wall he'd built. But now she held a child, a beautiful little boy who looked no older than 5 years. "Mommy, who's the fancy man?" the boy asked, his voice carrying that pure curiosity unique to children. His small fingers left sticky prints on Kenya's shirt, and there was a smudge of flour on his round cheek that made something in Minho's chest constrict painfully. Kenya's arms tightened protectively around her son, maternal instinct taking over. "This is an old friend, sweetheart." "Minho, this is my son, Marcus." The little boy studied Minho with an expression far too serious for someone so young. "You here for cupcakes? Mommy makes the best cupcakes in the whole entire world. I help sometimes, but mostly I just make big messes." His giggle was pure sunshine bottled into sound. Minho found his voice, though it emerged rougher than he intended. "Hello, Marcus. I'm actually here to order a cake." "Ew, what kind?" Marcus's eyes sparked with excitement. "Mommy can make anything. She made a spaceship cake for my friend's birthday, and it had real rockets and everything." "Marcus, baby, why don't you go wash your hands while I help this customer?" Kenya's voice remained steady, but Minho caught the slight tremor beneath. "Okay, Mommy." Marcus squirmed down from her arms and scampered toward the back of the bakery, his light-up sneakers flashing with each step. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Kenya moved behind the counter, creating a physical barrier between them, her professional demeanor sliding into place like armor. "What can I help you with today?" Minho stepped closer, his hands clasped behind his back. "I need an engagement cake. Something elaborate. Cost isn't a concern." Something flickered across Kenya's face, hurt perhaps, or maybe disappointment. She reached for an order pad, her movements precise and controlled. "When do you need it?" "1 week from today." "That's pretty short notice for an elaborate cake." Her pen hovered above the paper. "How many guests?" 200. The number tasted like ash on his tongue. Kenya's pen went still. That's quite a large wedding. It's more of a merger, Miho said quietly, immediately regretting the honesty. Their eyes met across the counter, and for a heartbeat the years melted away. He was 26 again, a business student at UCLA, completely captivated by the brilliant literature major who challenged every assumption he'd ever held about life. She was the girl who made him believe he could choose love over duty, passion over obligation. "Congratulations," Kenya said finally, though the words seemed to catch in her throat. Before Miho could respond, Marcus came bounding back, his hands now clean, but his face still sporting that adorable flower smudge. "Mommy, can I show him my special cupcakes?" "Marcus, we're working. Please, they're really good. I made them all by myself." The little boy's enthusiasm was infectious, and despite the tension crackling between the adults, Miho found himself genuinely curious. "I'd like to see them," Miho said, surprising himself. Marcus beamed and rushed to a small display case near the register. "These ones, I made the frosting myself." "Well, Mommy helped, but I did all the swirls." He pointed to a tray of cupcakes that were clearly the work of a 5-year-old, lopsided, overfrosted, and absolutely charming. "They look delicious," Miho said, and he meant it. "Want to try one?" "Mommy says sharing makes everything taste better." Miho glanced at Kenya, who was watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. "If it's all right with your mother." "Of course," Kenya said softly. "Marcus, get Mr. Kong a plate." "Just Miho is fine," he said, accepting the slightly misshapen cupcake from Marcus's eager hands. The frosting was overly sweet and the cake somewhat dense. But as Miho took a bite, he couldn't remember the last time food had tasted so meaningful. "This is excellent, Marcus. You're a natural baker." The little boy practically glowed with pride. "Mommy's teaching me everything. She says baking is like magic. You mix love with flour and sugar and happiness comes out." Miho's throat tightened. "Your mother is very wise." "She's the smartest person in the whole world," Marcus declared with the absolute certainty of a child. "She reads me stories in different languages, and she can make any cake you can dream of, and she gives the best hugs when I'm scared." Rosa Martinez emerged from the kitchen, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, her kind eyes taking in the scene with obvious curiosity. "Kenya, is everything all right out here?" "Mrs. M, this is Kang Minho. He's here to order an engagement cake." The older woman's eyebrows rose slightly as she studied Miho with the shrewd gaze of someone who'd seen enough of life to read between the lines. Welcome to Sweet Dreams. Kenya is our master baker. She'll create something beautiful for you." "I have no doubt," Miho replied, his gaze never leaving Kenya's face. Tasha Williams appeared from the back room, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, her apron dusted with cocoa powder. She took one look at the scene, Kenya's tense posture, Miho's intense stare, Marcus happily munching on a cupcake, and her eyes widened with understanding. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh my." After some gentle maneuvering by Mrs. Martinez and Tasha, Miho found himself alone with Kenya again, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on them like a heavy fog. "So," she said, her voice deliberately light. "An engagement cake. Tell me about your fiancé." Miho's jaw tightened. "Her name is Park Ji-yeon. She's suitable." "Suitable," Kenya repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "How romantic." "Kenya, does she know about your business?" The question was sharp, cutting. Miho's eyes hardened. "That's not relevant to cake design, is it? I mean, should I avoid certain colors? Red might be a bit too on the nose, don't you think?" The barb found its mark. Miho stepped closer to the counter, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You don't know anything about my life now." "You're right," Kenya said, meeting his intensity with her own. "I don't, because you made sure of that when you disappeared without a word 6 years ago." The accusation hung between them like a blade. Miho's hands clenched at his sides, the urge to explain, to tell her everything, warring with the knowledge that some truths were too dangerous to share. I had my reasons. I'm sure you did. Kenya's smile was sharp as broken glass. Well, congratulations on finding someone suitable. I'm sure you'll be very happy together. Before Miho could respond, Marcus came racing back into the front room, his face bright with excitement. Mommy, Tasha taught me how to make chocolate curls. Can we put them on the fancy man's cake? The innocent question shattered the tension like a stone through glass. Kenya's expression softened immediately as she looked at her son. That's a wonderful idea, baby. I'm sure Mr. Kang would love chocolate curls on his cake. Miho found himself nodding, though he couldn't have cared less about cake decorations. All he could focus on was the way Kenya's entire being seemed to light up when she looked at Marcus, the pure love that radiated from her like warmth from a fire. They spent the next several minutes discussing details, flavors, timeline, delivery, logistics. But underneath the professional conversation, Miho was acutely aware of every breath Kenya took, every gesture she made, every moment their hands accidentally brushed. I'll have some preliminary sketches ready by tomorrow, she said finally. If you'd like to come by and review them, I'll be here. Their eyes locked, and for a moment the bakery, the other customers, even Marcus seemed to fade away. There was only them, only this moment, only the weight of everything they'd lost and everything that might still be possible. As Miho prepared to leave, Marcus tugged on his jacket. Miho, will you come back and help me make more cupcakes sometime? The request was so hopeful, so trusting that Miho felt something crack open in his chest. I'd like that very much. Promise? Miho looked into those innocent brown eyes and felt his world shift again. I promise. The next afternoon, Miho found himself standing outside Sweet Dreams Bakery, his usual confidence replaced by an unfamiliar nervousness. He'd spent the entire night thinking about Kenya, about Marcus, about the life that could have been. The bell chimed as he entered, and immediately he was greeted by the sound of laughter from the back room. Marcus's giggle mixed with Kenya's warm chuckle, creating a melody that made Miho's chest ache with longing. We're back here, Kenya called out, her voice carrying a lightness it hadn't possessed yesterday. Miho followed the sound through a doorway marked staff only, and found himself in a spacious kitchen that looked like something from a fairy tale. Kenya stood at a large island, her hair pulled back in a colorful headband, flour dusting her dark skin like stardust. Marcus perched on a step stool beside her, his small hands covered in what appeared to be chocolate frosting. Miho, Marcus exclaimed, his face lighting up. Look what I'm making. It's a chocolate volcano. Miho moved closer, studying the elaborate creation taking shape under Marcus's enthusiastic but inexpert hands. That's very impressive. Marcus is my official taste tester, Kenya explained, her smile more relaxed than it had been yesterday. He takes the job very seriously. Someone has to make sure everything tastes perfect, Marcus said solemnly, then immediately contradicted his serious tone by licking frosting off his fingers. I have your sketches ready, Kenya said, wiping her hands on her apron. But first, would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot. That would be nice. Thank you. As Kenya moved to pour coffee, Miho found himself studying the kitchen more closely. Children's drawings were taped to one wall, clearly Marcus's artwork depicting various cakes and what appeared to be the three of them as stick figures. Family photos were scattered among professional certificates showing Kenya and Marcus at various ages, always together, always smiling. Mommy went to school for a really long time, Marcus announced, following Miho's gaze. She has lots of fancy papers that say she's smart. I can see that, Miho said, noting the culinary degree from Le Cordon Bleu alongside a literature degree from UCLA, the same university where they'd met. She was going to be a teacher, Marcus continued. But then she decided baking was more fun, and she's really, really good at it. Marcus, Kenya said gently, returning with a steaming mug. I'm sure Miho doesn't need my whole life story. But Miho found that he desperately wanted her whole life story. He wanted to know about every moment he'd missed, every decision that had led her here, every smile and tear and triumph that had shaped the woman standing before him. Actually, I'd like to hear it, he said quietly. Kenya's eyes met his, and something passed between them, a recognition of the time they'd lost, the conversations they'd never had. Maybe later. Right now, let me show you what I've designed for your cake. She spread several sketches across the counter, each one more elaborate than the last. The designs were stunning, multi-tiered masterpieces that looked more like architectural marvels than desserts. These are beautiful, he said, because they were. You're incredibly talented. Thank you, Kenya's professional pride was evident. I was thinking we could incorporate some traditional Korean elements if you'd like, cherry blossoms, perhaps, or a more geometric design inspired by hanbok patterns. The thoughtfulness of the suggestion caught Miho off guard. You remember. I remember a lot of things, Kenya said softly. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken memories. Miho remembered lazy Sunday mornings when Kenya would quiz him about Korean traditions, her genuine curiosity about his heritage making him fall deeper in love with each question. Can I help decorate the fancy cake? Marcus asked, breaking the spell. Oh, sweetheart. This is a very special cake for grown-ups, Kenya said gently. But I'm a good decorator. Look. Marcus gestured proudly to his chocolate volcano, which had grown significantly more elaborate and significantly more unstable since Miho's arrival. Miho found himself crouching down to Marcus's eye level. You know what? I think every cake needs a little bit of magic from an expert like you. Marcus's eyes went wide. Really? Really? Maybe you could make some special decorations that your mom could incorporate into the design. Can I, Mommy, please? Kenya looked between her son and Miho, something unreadable flickering in her expression. I suppose we could find a way to include some of Marcus's artistic touches. Working side by side, they fell into an easy rhythm that felt achingly familiar. Kenya would point out spots Miho had missed while cleaning, and he would tease her about her perfectionist tendencies. Marcus provided running commentary on their cleaning technique. You guys get an 8, he announced. You would get a 10, but Miho missed that spot right there. Miho looked where Marcus was pointing and indeed found a small smudge of frosting. You're absolutely right. Thank you for keeping me honest. That's my job, Marcus said importantly. Mommy says everyone needs someone to keep them honest. Your mommy is very wise, Miho said, his eyes finding Kenya's. Do you have a mommy? Marcus asked with characteristic directness. The innocent question hit harder than Miho expected. I did. She died when I was young. Marcus's face immediately crumpled with sympathy. That's really sad. I'm sorry. Thank you, Marcus. That's very kind of you to say. Do you miss her? Every day. Without warning, Marcus climbed down from his stool and wrapped his small arms around Miho's legs in a fierce hug. Hugs make everything better. Mommy taught me that. Miho's throat closed up completely. He looked over Marcus's head to find Kenya watching them, tears glistening in her eyes. Slowly, carefully, he placed his hands on Marcus's back, returning the embrace. Thank you, he whispered. You're right. That does make it better. When Marcus finally pulled away, his face was serious. If you want, you can share my mommy. She gives really good hugs, and she makes the best grilled cheese in the world, and she reads stories with all the voices. The offer, delivered with such innocent generosity, nearly broke Miho's heart. That's very generous of you, Marcus. As they finished up and Miho prepared to leave, Marcus tugged on his jacket. Miho, will you come back and help me make more cupcakes sometime? I'd like that very much. Promise? I promise. Friday arrived with the kind of crisp Los Angeles morning that made everything seem possible. Miho had barely slept, his mind churning with thoughts of Kenya, Marcus, and the impossible situation he'd created for himself. He arrived at Sweet Dreams Bakery to find Kenya in the kitchen, putting finishing touches on what was undoubtedly the most beautiful cake he'd ever seen. 5 tiers of pristine white fondant decorated with delicate cherry blossoms that seemed to dance across the surface. It was elegant, sophisticated, and utterly beautiful. It was also completely wrong. "Kenya, this is incredible," he said, because it was. "Thank you. I incorporated some of Marcus's design elements." She pointed to small, almost invisible details, tiny rainbow touches hidden among the blossoms, subtle dragon scale patterns worked into the base. "They're very subtle, but they're there." Minho felt his throat close up. Even in creating a cake for his engagement to another woman, Kenya had found a way to include her son's joy, his innocence, his love. "It's perfect," he whispered. Marcus appeared from the back room, his face bright with excitement. "Minho, look what I drew for your cake." He held up a colorful drawing of a towering cake decorated with dragons, rainbows, and stick figures. "This is remarkable," Minho said, settling into a small chair. "Tell me about it." "Well, this is you." Marcus pointed to a tall stick figure in black. "And this is your bride, lady. But I don't know what she looks like, so I gave her a crown because brides are like princesses, right?" "Right," Minho managed, his heart breaking. "Are you sad?" "You look sad," Marcus observed with brutal honesty. Minho crouched down to Marcus's level. "I'm not sad exactly. More complicated." "What's complicated mean?" "It means when you want 2 different things at the same time and you can't have both." Marcus considered this seriously. "Like when I want ice cream and vegetables for dinner." "Something like that." "Mommy says, sometimes the right choice isn't the easy choice." The wisdom in those simple words hit Minho like a physical blow. He looked up at Kenya, who was watching their interaction with an unreadable expression. After Marcus was gently redirected by Kenya, the kitchen fell silent except for the gentle hum of refrigeration units. "He doesn't know," Minho said quietly. "Know what? About us? About what we were?" Kenya's hand stilled on the invoice she was preparing. "There's nothing for him to know. We were college kids who dated for a while. Ancient history." "Is that really how you remember it?" Kenya's laugh was bitter. "How I remember it doesn't matter. What matters is what happened." "Kenya, don't." Her voice was sharp now, all pretense of professional politeness gone. "Don't you dare try to rewrite history now. You left, Minho. You disappeared without a word, without an explanation, without even a goodbye." The pain in her voice was like a knife to his heart. "You talked to Sung Jin. I was desperate. I thought maybe he'd know where you were, if you were okay. He told me you'd made your choice, that you decided your family obligations were more important than whatever we had." "It wasn't like that," Minho said quietly. "Then what was it like?" "My father was dying," Minho said, the words coming out in a rush. He had maybe weeks left, and the organization was in chaos. There were rival families circling like vultures, ready to tear apart everything my grandfather had built. I had to choose between watching my family's legacy crumble or stepping up to take control. Kenya went very still. "Your father died 3 weeks after I got back to Korea. I spent those last weeks learning everything I could about the business, about how to keep our people safe. And then I spent the next 6 years trying to legitimize everything, to move us away from the old ways." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you'd want to come with me, and I couldn't let you do that." "That wasn't your choice to make, was it?" Minho's voice was rough with emotion. "You think I could have brought you into that world? You think I could have watched you try to navigate the politics and the danger and the constant threat of violence? So you made the decision for both of us." "I made the only decision I could live with." They stared at each other across the kitchen, 6 years of hurt and misunderstanding hanging between them like a wall. "I was pregnant," Kenya said quietly. The words hit Minho like a physical blow. He actually staggered backward, his hand reaching for the counter to steady himself. "What?" "I found out 2 weeks after you left. I was scared and alone and had no idea how to reach you." Minho's mind reeled. Marcus is your son." Yes. The kitchen spun around him. Miho felt like he was drowning, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Marcus, sweet, innocent, brilliant Marcus, was his son, his child. Why didn't you? How could you not tell me? Tell you what? Tell you that the man who abandoned me without a word had left me pregnant and alone? I would have come back if I'd known. Would you? Kenya's eyes blazed with anger and pain. Would you really have abandoned your dying father and your family's legacy for a pregnant girlfriend you'd already walked away from once? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Miho wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that he would have made a different choice. But the truth was he didn't know. I don't know, he admitted quietly. At least you're honest. Kenya's voice was flat now, emotionless. I spent the first 2 years of Marcus's life thinking you might come back, that you might somehow find out about him and want to be part of his life. But you never did. So I stopped waiting. Kenya, I'm so sorry. If I had known, but you didn't know. And now you're here ordering a cake for your engagement to another woman, and my son thinks you're just some nice man who likes his cupcakes. Miho felt like his world was crumbling around him. Everything he thought he knew, everything he'd built his life on, suddenly seemed meaningless in the face of this revelation. Does he know about me? He knows his father isn't in the picture. He's never asked for details, and I've never volunteered them. He's happy, Miho. He has a good life, a family that loves him, a future full of possibilities. I won't let you disrupt that. What do you want from me? He asked quietly. Nothing, Kenya said, and the finality in her voice was devastating. I want nothing from you. I want you to take your beautiful cake, marry your suitable bride, and leave us alone. Kenya, please. Her voice broke slightly. Please, just go. Miho stood there for a long moment, memorizing every detail of her face, every nuance of her expression. Then, because he was a coward, because he didn't know how to fight for something he'd never learned to value above duty, he nodded. I'll have someone pick up the cake tomorrow. As Miho walked toward the door, he heard Marcus's laughter from the front room, bright and innocent and completely unaware that his world had just shifted on its axis. Miho, Kenya called softly. He turned back, hope flaring in his chest. He's a good kid. The best. He deserves better than a father who puts business before family. The words were a challenge and a dismissal all at once. Miho nodded once, then walked away from his son for the second time in 5 years, leaving his heart scattered across the flour-dusted floor of Sweet Dreams Bakery. The engagement dinner was held at Nobu Malibu, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the Pacific Ocean. Miho sat surrounded by the most powerful families in the Korean-American business community and felt completely hollow inside. The conversation flowed around him, discussions of territorial agreements and the advantages of uniting the Kang and Park family interests, but all he could think about was Marcus's gap-toothed smile and the way Kenya's eyes had looked when she told him about their son. Park Ji-yeon sat beside him, elegant in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month. She was beautiful, intelligent, and perfectly suited to be the wife of a man in his position. She was also a stranger. Miho seems distracted tonight, Ji-yeon's father observed, his tone carrying just a hint of concern. Just tired, Miho replied smoothly. It's been a busy week. His phone buzzed with a text message and Miho glanced down to see a photo from Tasha Williams. It showed Marcus in the bakery kitchen, his face covered in chocolate frosting, holding up a lopsided cupcake with a huge grin. The message read, "Thought you might like to see the master baker at work. Kenya asked me to send this." Miho's breath caught. Kenya had asked Tasha to send him a picture of Marcus. Despite everything, despite her anger and pain, she'd thought of him. "Who's texting you?" Ji-yeon asked, leaning slightly to see his phone. "Work," Miho said quickly, turning the screen away. But as he looked at the photo again, studying every detail of his son's face, Miho felt something shift inside him. This little boy, his little boy, was growing up without him. And Miho was sitting in a restaurant planning a wedding to a woman he didn't love while his real family was miles away. "Excuse me," Miho said abruptly, standing from the table. "I need to make a call." He walked out onto the restaurant's terrace, the cool ocean breeze doing nothing to calm the storm in his chest. His phone buzzed again, another photo from Tasha. This one showing Marcus asleep in a chair in the bakery office, his small body curled up like a kitten. The message read, "Long day for the little guy. Kenya's working late to finish her cake." Miho stared at the image, his heart clenching. Kenya was working late, probably exhausted, while their son slept nearby. She was doing it all alone, just as she'd been doing for 5 years. "There you are." Miho turned to find Jiyeon approaching, her expression concerned. "Is everything all right? You seemed upset." "Just business complications," Miho said. Jiyeon moved to stand beside him at the railing. "You know, we don't have to do this if you don't want to." The unexpected words made Miho turn to look at her fully. "What do you mean?" "This marriage, this whole arrangement," Jiyeon's voice was calm, matter of fact. "I know it's what our families want, what makes sense for business. But if your heart is elsewhere." "Miho, I'm not blind. You've been distracted ever since you went to order the wedding cake. And just now, when you got those text messages, your whole face changed. You looked happy, hopeful." Miho studied her face, looking for signs of hurt or anger, but found only understanding. "You deserve better than a husband who's in love with someone else." "Yes, I do," Jiyeon said simply. "And you deserve better than a wife you're marrying out of obligation." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken truth settling between them. "What will you tell your family?" Miho asked. "That we realized we weren't compatible, that we want different things from life." "It won't be a complete lie." Miho felt something loosen in his chest, a pressure he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. "Are you sure about this? Are you?" Miho thought about Marcus's laughter, about Kenya's fierce protectiveness, about the family he'd walked away from once and was being given a second chance to claim. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'm sure." Jiyeon smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since their engagement began. "Then go get them. It might not be that simple. Kenya has good reasons not to trust me. Then you'll have to prove that you've changed, that you're worth the risk." As they walked back into the restaurant to make their announcement, Miho felt his phone buzz with one more message from Tasha. This one was just text. "She still loves you, you know. She's just scared." The announcement was met with shock, concern, and ultimately grudging acceptance. Jiyeon handled the questions with grace and diplomacy, while Miho found himself thinking about tomorrow, about walking into Sweet Dreams Bakery, not as a customer ordering a wedding cake, but as a man fighting for his family. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Miho stood outside Sweet Dreams Bakery at exactly 9 o'clock, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the window, he could see Kenya moving around the kitchen, her movements efficient and graceful. Marcus sat at the small table in the corner, carefully arranging what appeared to be an army of toy dinosaurs. The bell chimed as Miho entered, and both Kenya and Marcus looked up. Marcus's face immediately lit up with joy. "Miho, you came back. Look, I brought my dinosaurs to show you." He held up a small plastic T-Rex. "This one's name is Chomper, and he's the king of all the dinosaurs." "He's very impressive," Miho said, crouching down to examine the toy with appropriate seriousness. "Does he help with the baking?" Marcus giggled. "Dinosaurs can't bake, silly. They don't have the right hands for mixing." "That's a very good point. I hadn't considered the hand situation." While Miho engaged with Marcus, he was acutely aware of Kenya watching them, her expression unreadable. "Your cake is ready," she said when Marcus became absorbed in arranging his dinosaurs. "Actually," Miho said, straightening up, "I need to talk to you about that." Something flickered in Kenya's eyes, weariness perhaps, or resignation. "If you want changes to the design, it's too late." "I don't want changes to the design. I want to cancel the order." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Kenya went very still. Cancel. The engagement is off. The wedding isn't happening. Marcus looked up from his dinosaurs, his young face scrunched in confusion. But you already have the pretty cake. Why don't you want it anymore? Miho looked at his son, and felt his heart clench with love and terror in equal measure. Because I realized I was about to marry the wrong person. Oh, Marcus considered this with the seriousness of a 5-year-old philosopher. That would be awkward. Despite everything, Miho found himself smiling. Very awkward. Marcus, Kenya said, her voice carefully controlled. Why don't you take your dinosaurs to the back room? I need to talk to Miho alone. Okay, Mommy. But can Miho come see my dinosaur city when you're done talking? We'll see, baby. The moment Marcus was out of earshot, Kenya's professional mask cracked. What game are you playing? She demanded. No game. I called off the engagement last night. Why? Because I can't marry someone else when I'm in love with you. The confession hung between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they could cross. Kenya's face cycled through a dozen emotions: shock, anger, hope, fear. You don't get to do this, she said finally. You don't get to walk back into our lives and blow everything up because you suddenly had an attack of conscience. I'm not trying to blow anything up. I'm trying to fix what I broke. Some things can't be fixed, Miho. Some damage is permanent. I don't believe that. Then you're a fool. But there were tears in her eyes now. Maybe I am. But I'm a fool who loves you, who's loved you for 6 years, even when I was trying to forget you, who wants to be part of Marcus's life, if you'll let me. He doesn't need you, Kenya said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe not. But I need him. I need both of you. Kenya turned away, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. You have no idea what it was like, being pregnant and alone and terrified. You did make the right choice. Look at him, Kenya. Look at what an incredible kid you've raised. You did that all by yourself. And what about your business, your family obligations, the world you live in? Miho had been expecting this question. I'm working to legitimize everything, to move away from the old ways. That's not good enough. I won't expose Marcus to that world, not even on the edges. Then I'll leave it. The words came out before Miho had fully processed them. But once they were spoken, he realized he meant them completely. What? I'll leave the organization, turn control over to Sung Jin. You can't just walk away from something like that. I can. I will. For you, for Marcus, for the family we could be. Kenya stared at him, searching his face for signs of deception. You're serious. Dead serious. Rosa Martinez emerged from the office, her wise eyes taking in the tension between them. Mija, she said to Kenya. Perhaps you should listen to what this man has to say. Sometimes the heart knows things the mind hasn't figured out yet. It's complicated, Kenya said weakly. The best things usually are. Mrs. Martinez patted Kenya's shoulder. Take the day off. Talk to this man. Figure out what your heart is telling you. After some gentle persuasion from Mrs. Martinez and Tasha, Kenya agreed to walk with Miho to a nearby park. They sat on a bench surrounded by oak trees, watching children play on the swings. So, Kenya said finally, you called off your engagement. I did. Because of us. Because I realized I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life again. Kenya was quiet for a long moment. He asks about you, you know. Not directly, but he asks why some kids have daddies and he doesn't. Kids are intuitive. He's never done that before, never taken to a stranger so quickly. Kenya's voice was soft, wondering. It's like he recognized something in you. Maybe he did. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Kenya spoke again. If I let you into his life, into our life, I need to know you're serious. I need to know this isn't some midlife crisis or guilt-driven impulse that you'll regret in 6 months. It's not. How can you be sure? Miho turned to face her fully. Because I've spent 6 years trying to forget you and failing miserably. Because seeing you with Marcus, seeing the life you've built, the woman you've become, It made me realize that everything I thought mattered doesn't matter at all if I don't have you. Tears were sliding down Kenya's cheeks now. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. What if we try this and it doesn't work? What if you decide the sacrifice is too much? What if Marcus gets attached to you and then loses you? What if we don't try and spend the rest of our lives wondering what could have been? Kenya laughed shakily. When did you become an optimist? About 5 minutes after I walked into your bakery and realized what I'd been missing. She was quiet for so long that Minho began to think she was going to say no. But then she spoke, her voice barely audible. Okay, we can try. But slowly, carefully, with rules. Minho's heart soared. Whatever you need. I need you to prove that you're serious about leaving your old life behind. I need you to show me that you can be a reliable presence in Marcus's life. And I need time. Time to trust you again. Time to figure out if what we had can become what we need. How much time? As much as it takes. Minho nodded, understanding that this was the best offer he was going to get, and more than he deserved. What about Marcus? What do we tell him? The truth, age appropriately. That you're someone special to me, that you want to spend time with us, that we're going to see if we can be a family. And if he asks about me being his father? When he's ready to know, we'll tell him. But that's a conversation that happens when I'm sure you're going to stick around. As they walked back toward the bakery, Minho felt lighter than he had in years. It wasn't going to be easy. He had a lot to prove, a lot of trust to rebuild. But for the first time since he'd left Kenya 6 years ago, he felt like he was walking toward something instead of away from it. When they returned to Sweet Dreams Bakery, they were greeted by the sound of Marcus's delighted laughter. He was standing on a step stool at the main counter, carefully piping frosting onto cupcakes under Mrs. Martinez's patient supervision. Mommy, Minho, look what I made. He held up a cupcake that was more frosting than cake, decorated with what appeared to be a rainbow made of sprinkles. It's for you, he announced, holding the cupcake out to Minho. Because you looked sad earlier, and cupcakes make everything better. Minho accepted the offering with hands that weren't quite steady. Thank you, Marcus. This is the most beautiful cupcake I've ever seen. As Minho took a bite of the overly sweet, slightly lopsided cupcake, he thought about the perfect wedding cake sitting in the back room, elaborate, expensive, and completely meaningless. This cupcake, made by his son's small hands and given with pure love, was worth more than all the strategic alliances and business arrangements in the world. So, Tasha said, appearing from the back room with barely contained excitement. Did you two figure everything out? We're going to try, Kenya said simply. Yes, Tasha pumped her fist in the air. I knew it. This is the best day ever. What's the best day ever? Marcus asked, looking confused but excited. Today, Minho said, ruffling his son's hair. Today is the best day ever. And as he stood in the warm flower-dusted kitchen, surrounded by the scent of vanilla and the sound of his family's laughter, Minho realized he was finally, truly home. 9 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Sweet Dreams Bakery, casting golden light across the display cases filled with fresh pastries and elaborate cakes. The familiar chime of the bell announced the arrival of the first customers of the day, but Minho barely looked up from his task. He stood behind the counter, his sleeves rolled up and his hands covered in flour, carefully piping decorations onto a 3-tier birthday cake under the watchful supervision of his 6-year-old assistant. No, Appa, Marcus said with the patience of someone far beyond his years, using the Korean word for father that had become as natural as breathing. The roses have to be bigger, like this. He demonstrated with his own piping bag, creating a frosting rose that was indeed much more impressive than Minho's attempt. You're absolutely right, Minho said solemnly. I clearly need more practice. That's okay. Mommy says practice makes perfect, and you've only been learning for 9 months. It took me a whole year to make good roses. Minho smiled, still amazed by his son's generous spirit and natural talent. In the 9 months since he'd walked back into their lives, Marcus had accepted him with an openness that both humbled and terrified Minho. The transition hadn't always been smooth. There had been tantrums, confusion, and moments of heartbreak. But there had also been magic. Bedtime stories told in a mixture of English and Korean, Saturday morning trips to the farmer's market, quiet moments when his son would fall asleep against Minho's chest while they watched cartoons. "Is the birthday cake almost ready?" Kenya asked, emerging from the kitchen with her hair pulled back in a messy bun and a smudge of chocolate on her cheek. She looked beautiful and harried and completely perfect. The simple gold band on her left ring finger caught the morning light, a promise ring Minho had given her 3 months ago when she'd finally said yes to his proposal. "Almost," Minho said, stepping back to admire their handiwork. "What do you think, Chef Marcus?" Marcus studied the cake with the serious expression of a professional critic. "It needs more sprinkles. Everything's better with sprinkles." "Sprinkles it is," Kenya agreed, reaching for a container of rainbow sprinkles. As she moved past Minho, he caught her hand gently. "You have chocolate on your face," he said softly, reaching up to brush the smudge away with his thumb. "Occupational hazard," she murmured. But she didn't pull away from his touch. They were taking things slowly, just as Kenya had insisted. Minho had kept his promise about leaving his old life behind. The transition had taken months of careful planning, but it was done. Minho now ran a legitimate consulting firm, helping other organizations transition away from illegal activities. It was satisfying work that didn't require him to compromise his values or put his family at risk. "Appa," Marcus said suddenly. "Can we put a dragon on the cake? Dragons are cool." Minho's heart still skipped a beat every time Marcus called him that. The conversation about Minho being his biological father had happened 4 months ago, prompted by Marcus's increasingly direct questions. Kenya had handled it with characteristic grace, and Marcus had processed the information with the resilience of childhood before moving on to more important matters, like whether they could get ice cream for dinner. "I think a dragon would be perfect," Minho said, reaching for the green frosting. As they worked together, Marcus directing, Minho executing, and Kenya adding finishing touches, the bell above the door chimed. Sung Jin entered, looking slightly out of place in his expensive suit among the pastel decorations. "Hyung," he said, then caught himself. "Sorry, Minho." "It's okay," Minho said, wiping his hands on his apron. "How did the meeting go?" "Better than expected. The transition is complete. Everything's running smoothly." Minho nodded, grateful for his friend's support during the difficult months of stepping away from the organization. "Uncle Sung Jin," Marcus called out, having adopted the honorary title. "Look at our dragon cake." "It's magnificent," Sung Jin said seriously. "The dragon looks very fierce. Minho made the body, but I made the head because I'm better at dragon heads." "I can see that. Your dragon head is clearly superior." Marcus beamed with pride, then turned back to his decorating with renewed enthusiasm. "How are things?" Sung Jin asked Minho quietly. "Good. Really good. No regrets?" Minho looked around the bakery, at Kenya humming softly as she arranged pastries in the display case, at Marcus carefully adding final touches to their dragon cake, at the life they were building together, one day at a time. "None," he said firmly. "I'm glad. You look happy, Hyung. Happier than I've seen you in, well, ever." "I am happy." And it was true. Minho had never imagined that happiness could be found in flour-dusted aprons and early morning baking sessions and bedtime stories about brave knights and friendly dragons. But real happiness, he learned, was about being trusted with a child's secrets and being forgiven for past mistakes and being allowed to love someone completely and without reservation. "Mommy," Marcus said suddenly. "Can we tell Minho about the surprise now?" "What surprise?" Minho asked, looking between his son and Kenya. Kenya's cheeks flushed pink, and she placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. "It's not really a surprise. More like news." Minho's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Kenya, "We're having a baby," she said softly, her voice full of wonder and joy. "Marcus is going to be a big brother." Minho felt his knees go weak. Another child. Another chance to be there from the beginning, to not miss a single moment. "Really?" he whispered. "Really?" "Really," Kenya confirmed, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes." Marcus pumped his small fist in the air. "I'm going to teach the baby everything, like how to make cupcakes and how to draw dragons and how to be brave." Minho pulled Kenya into his arms, holding her close as the magnitude of their growing family washed over him. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "Both of you. All of you." "We love you too," Kenya whispered back. As they stood there in the warm flower-dusted kitchen, surrounded by the scent of vanilla and the sound of Marcus's excited chatter about being the best big brother ever, Minho reflected on the strange turns life could take. He'd come to Sweet Dreams Bakery to order a cake for a wedding that would have been the biggest mistake of his life. Instead, he'd found his family, his future, and his home. Sometimes the best things came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes love was patient enough to wait for second chances. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you got to discover that the life you'd always wanted was waiting for you behind a bakery counter, covered in flour and holding a little boy who would teach you that the sweetest things in life couldn't be bought or negotiated or arranged. They could only be earned through love, patience, and the courage to choose happiness over obligation. "Can we name the baby cupcake?" Marcus asked seriously, making both adults laugh through their tears. "We'll definitely consider it," Kenya said, ruffling his hair. "Or dragon. Dragons are really cool." "We have plenty of time to think about names," Minho said, crouching down to Marcus's level. "But first, we need to finish this birthday cake. What do you say we add some extra magic to it?" "Yes, the best magic ever." As Marcus dove back into decorating with renewed enthusiasm, Minho caught Kenya's hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me a second chance, for letting me be part of this, for showing me what really matters." "Thank you for proving you were worth it," Kenya replied, her voice soft with emotion. The bell chimed again as more customers entered, and the morning rush began in earnest. But as Minho moved behind the counter, serving coffee and pastries alongside the woman he loved, while their son chatted happily about his upcoming role as Big Brother, he knew he'd made the right choice. He'd come to buy an engagement cake and found his forever instead. And that was the sweetest ending of all. Mrs. Martinez emerged from the office, took one look at the glowing faces around her, and smiled knowingly. Mija," she said to Kenya. "I told you sometimes the heart knows things the mind hasn't figured out yet." "You were right, Mrs. M," Kenya said, leaning into Miho's side. "You were absolutely right." As the morning sun continued to stream through the windows of Sweet Dreams Bakery, illuminating a family that had found each other against all odds, Minho realized that some stories didn't end. They just began again, sweeter than before. And in a bakery filled with the scent of vanilla and the sound of laughter, where a Korean syndicate leader had learned to pipe frosting roses and a little boy was planning to teach his future sibling about dragons, love had indeed conquered all. If you enjoyed this story of second chances and sweet redemptions, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another heartwarming tale. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever gotten a second chance at something you thought was lost forever? We'd love to hear your stories. And if you're craving more romance, check out our playlist of love stories that will make your heart soar. Until next time, remember that sometimes the sweetest dreams are the ones we almost let slip away.